My name is Vangelis Vitalis. I'm the New Zealand APEC SOM chair for this, our host year. And I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to deliver these remarks. And I want to apologise for having to do this in a pre-recorded way. But the day on which you will be watching me give these remarks is a day that I will actually be in an airplane joining my minister on one of his visits. I did, however, want to take up this invitation because what you are doing and this public-private dialogue on services is so critically important for our region. Let me step back a moment and give you a sense of the context that we're operating in at present. Ever since November, since we took up the hosting of APEC, 100,000 new COVID infections a day. 1 million people have died. It is difficult to overstate how devastating this pandemic has been and how catastrophic it has been for our economic prospects across the region. GDP contraction across the region has been in excess of between 2 and 4% across the region. We've never seen anything like that. While trade flows are gradually beginning to pick up, services remains an outlier. If you think about the collapse in tourism, transportation, and of course education services, that significant contraction is one of the big confronting challenges that we face. Because if we are going to come through this pandemic, and if we are going to position ourselves well as a region and as an institution, as an organisation of the 21 of us in APEC, services play a critical role. You all know the data. Services are a key driver of productivity, of competition, of innovation, of knowledge transfer, and you are a critical enabler of economic growth. Unfortunately, APEC, which has had a stellar record until recently, is starting to fall behind. Colleagues, it's easy to forget that our region, the 21 of us, account for nearly 50% of global trade and services flows. And there was a time when we were the leaders by a significant margin. I'm sorry to say, however, that over the last 3 years, we have actually lost our first place position. And I think there are some real warning signals there that we need to grapple with. And APEC is the ideal place in which to have that conversation about what it is that we need to challenge ourselves to deal with. The APEC competitiveness, the APEC Services Competitiveness Roadmap is a fantastic opportunity and tool by which we can diagnose some of the big existing challenges that confront us in the region if we are to get that growth out of the services sector. I want to particularly pay attention to the fact that some of the domestic regulatory hurdles that we are putting in place, that we are increasing as a consequence of COVID, some for good health-based reasons, but others that appear to be largely driven by protectionist impulses. These are the things we need to together lean in against and remind colleagues across the 21 of us that all of us need to pull in the right direction for that to become up. And if there's one lesson we've learned from the last 2 decades, it is that the next 2 decades needs to free up that movement among us. These are big challenging issues that we need to grapple with in the services sector. And I'm pleased to say that in this, our host year, we have had a strong focus on the way in which services can enable the response to the pandemic. It is no coincidence that trade ministers attached to their statement a separate standalone commitment to look at the way in which transportation and other essential services supplies could be made to work to deliver vaccines and essential goods across our region. There is a good understanding amongst us all that in order for us to be fully safe and to be able to resume the kind of travel that we all understand is necessary to deliver the services trade that you are all working in, that we need to make sure that we are vaccinated, that we are protected. And this was a clear message that leaders were able to send when my Prime Minister chaired the informal leaders meeting recently. It was that powerful message, first of all, that vaccinations and responding to the pandemic were a crucial part of our DNA in terms of how we're going to get ourselves out of this crisis. But the second important message out of both that meeting and the Trade Ministers meeting is that the trade and services sector needs to contribute, can contribute, and the way in which all 21 economies need to be thinking about this is the opportunity that this provides for all of us to drive the productivity we're going to need if we're going to be able to respond to the crisis in front of us and position us well for the recovery. Colleagues, thank you very much. Really looking forward to hearing the outcomes of your public-private dialogue in this really important sector in this critically important year. My thanks to you all again. As I said, we do have a confronting challenge. It is not good enough that our region is starting to fall behind the rest of the world. We can change that. We must change that. I leave it in your capable hands.